I'm J. Michael Tatum, and I play Dr. Davis. I like him because he is ostensibly the villain of the piece, but it's hard to call him a villain because he's trying to make good, and he may or may not be given the chance to do so because certain people can't let people outlive their past. Just saying, not pointing any fingers. Soldier. Yeah, it's interesting because I like the villains that start off, I actually think he's a rather likable character. I think he's a good therapist. I would go see him, and I mean, with his background, he knows from PTSD, so I would I would trust his judgment. I think what he brings out of the main character is very important to be established early on in the series because it makes the show a lot darker, a lot more morally ambiguous than we're sometimes used to seeing, and I think the story needs it. I started primarily in the stage. True story, when I was very young, I had a speech impediment, so the reason I actually came to the stage was because my speech therapist, my speech impediment was so profound that I rarely spoke. I had a speech therapist for years and years who had ties to the theater, and she discovered that if I had something to read from or to recite, that my stutter would tend to disappear. She urged me to follow the stage when I was a little kid, and the very first thing I ever did on stage was I played the hobby horse in The Velveteen Rabbit. Yeah, acting was just my thing when I was young, and then I grew up and decided I had to have a real responsible grown-up job, like, one that I hated but that paid the bills. So I kind of turned my back on acting for a while because I felt like it takes a rather courageous and crazy person to want to be an actor for a living after a certain point in life. And I decided, well, I may have the crazy down, but I don't have the courage. So I followed the straight and narrow, and then acting sort of found me again. I got work as a voice actor because I knew somebody that worked at a studio that needed some voice actors and said, hey, why don't you come in? And I flatly refused because I didn't even think of myself as an actor anymore at that point. I mean, it had been years. Luckily, the person wouldn't take no for an answer, and I started working there against my will, and then slowly but surely came to love it, and now I do it full time, and I can't imagine myself doing anything differently. So I tried to get away from it. I really did. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Well, acting in general, I think, appeals to me because it's the chance to get your head around other perspectives and other minds, not your own. I've always been fascinated by that. I've always been fascinated with the chance to have experiences that in the course of normal everyday life you just don't have access to. Acting was kind of a chance for me to explore facets of my own personality that otherwise never get an outlet. Which is also just a very nice way of saying I couldn't decide what I wanted to be when I grew up, so I wanted to be all the things, and what better way than to be an actor. So, but the cool thing about voice acting is that I'm not limited by my physical stature, or my age, or by, anything else about me that might, be an impediment towards this or that role because I don't look the part. I have more of a range vocally than I do physically, I feel. I think that's true of most actors. I've been able to play all sorts of characters that, on the voice acting side of things that I never would have been allowed to touch. So it's very liberating. I think I've really, really cut my chops as an actor because I think being a voice actor, there's rarely such a thing as type. As long as you have a range, you get to play all sorts of characters all the time. And while they're always my wheelhouse of characters that I return to again and again and again, I've gotten to do a phenomenal lot of things with my voice and discover things about myself in the process just as a human being that I never would have gotten to otherwise because I'm too tall or I'm too this or not enough that. So voice acting has always been very important to me for that reason, I think, and it is literally what brought me back into acting, something that was such a touchstone for me in my personal life that as I said earlier, that I'd walked away from. Voice acting brought me back into the fold, and so now I get to do what I love again because of it. There are differences. It depends on the project. A lot of times, for example, with dubs, you're working completely alone. That is to say that you're not with the other actor with whom you share the scene. Everyone is recorded independently of each other. So it can be a bit trying because you're kind of recording and performing in a vacuum, so to speak, and you don't even, you're not even privy to the finished product of your performance until it comes out for the audience to see. And you're like, oh, that's how I sound next to this person. Oh, that was their choice. With prelay, it's interesting. Prelay animation, of course, when they then animate to your performance as a voice actor, is interesting, but then I find that sometimes getting the freedom to do whatever I want with the lines tends to be a little terrifying. I feel the more choices I'm given, the more likely I am to choose wrong. Sometimes working in prelay is too liberating. Oh, I can't decide on the read I want. Oh, there's so many things I can do.